welcome to my channel. This here is a different kind of video than my regular floss tube videos. It is a how-to video. Now, over the last couple of years since I've been more active on social media when it comes to my stitching, a few people have approached me to ask for advice on stitching a full coverage and just wanted to get my take on things. And then even more recently, just last week actually, a follower on Instagram who said she was very new to full coverage cross stitch, only started over the whole break that the world had with COVID, and she wanted some tips and tricks and just my view on things. So I thought, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to put out a how-to video based on my personal experience. So I'll cover things like how to pick the fabric, how to measure the fabric, how to pick the right stitch, how to know where to start, and all those little questions that beginners might have. So I want to also explain that this video is, like I said, based on my own personal experience over the years of having stitched full coverage cross stitches. And it is by no means the right answer or the wrong answer. Everybody has their own opinion. These are my opinions based on my experience and based on my likes and dislikes. So they might not be the same for everybody, but it will still give you a kind of a little bit of view of my side of things, and then you can compare it to others out there. It'll give you a starting point. Most of the tips and tricks that I might give you, I think they will be very useful. You will be able to use them moving forward in your cross stitch. So to all the beginners out there, it's not scary. It can be so much fun, and I can't wait to help you on this journey to loving full coverage as much as I do. So let's begin. I'm making this video on the fly, so I don't have anything prepared. I just have the list of questions written down. I'm gonna go through them. I'm gonna turn the camera around, and there might be a lot of starting and stopping of the video, and I'll splice it all together because I'm literally going to grab things as I need them to explain the question that I need to be answered. So sit back and enjoy. And I hope this helps you all out there, and I hope I can provide a little bit of help to anybody who needs it. So thanks so much. I'm gonna turn the camera around and we'll start with the first question. All right, everyone. So let's begin with the first common question that everyone seems to have is, how do you choose the fabric? Well, for me, a lot of the times, because I have been stitching for a long time, I do have a preferred count that I like to stitch on. Now, 18 has been a preferred count for me, and a lot of my projects are also on 22 count. So I thought I'd show those two counts to begin with. Now, I know a lot of people out there who choose to do a Heaven and Earth Designs full coverage. The recommendation is 25 count. There's nothing wrong with 25 count, nothing at all. But at the same time, if you are a beginner, it wouldn't hurt to start with a higher count, meaning a larger count of fabric. Just, to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room, because 25 count can be very difficult to a beginner because it is so small. So let's begin by showing you a little bit of difference between the counts. So I've got two samples here. This one right here is 18 count, and this one is 22 count. So both are very lovely, and both will get the job done. 18 count is a little, you know what, maybe I'll get a needle so that you can actually see for reference what it's going to look like. Didn't I say I'm going to be doing this on the fly? So luckily I've got my projects next to me, but in reference to a needle, this is a size 28 needle that I prefer to use. It's not too thick that it goes, makes the holes bigger, and it really functions really well. Now, so just to give you a frame of reference, this is a needle and this is 18 count fabric. And I find this the most comfortable to stitch with. It's easy. I don't have to struggle too hard to find my place, and it just comes naturally when I'm stitching on 18 count fabric. At the same time, I have also been using 22 count for my full coverages, and I find that sometimes with full coverage, especially patterns with a lot of detail, the 22 count, it kind of brings everything a little bit closer to each other. So all those little intricate details, they kind of meld together perfectly, and you get a more an idea of what the design is supposed to be, especially if it's confetti heavy. I kind of like to work on the 22 count, but both are my preferred counts of fabric, 18 count as well as 22 count. Now, the other question I got was Aida versus Evenweave. Both of these are Aida, but I do also work with a lot of Evenweave. Again, this is a personal preference, but for beginners, I would probably suggest the Aida, only because it is just much easier to handle and less slip-ups. And I'll explain what I mean, because the Aida fabric, I'm going to bring this one closer. Aida fabric, I thought that was a fuzz, but it's actually part of the design. There's a little fuzz. So Aida fabric, this one is a stamped fabric, which is why there's nothing on the back, and that's why it says wash no detergent. Let's go to this corner so it's easier to see. So Aida fabric, as you can see, is woven in, and you can't, I'm going to grab my needle again, the stitches won't slip in and out of the holes. So if you go in one and you come out the other one, it's not going to slip into another hole. And I'll show you what I mean. I have a sample here of a project that I'm working on in 28 count, okay? So this is an Evenweave, and I don't think that that's an issue either. See that? So even 28 count, it stays in the hole that it is. But I'm actually going to use this one as a example. I got to maneuver myself a little bit. So I'm going to see if I can explain. Now, if you go into a stitch here, this is the hole you want to put the stitch in, and then you're going to come up in the back side and put it in this hole to get your X, and then here and here. Now, what happens with an Evenweave is you run the chance, so you see, you run the chance of it going under the crossover threads and slipping a stitch. So you have to be very careful in where you come up and where you come down. That's why for beginners, I suggest you stick with stitching on the Aida, which gives you a little bit more structure and less chance of slipping through the stitches. So you'll notice, if you can understand what I'm trying to say, you can't get under these weave. You can't get under the weave, but where on an Evenweave, you can. There is the possibility of being able to slip under the weave. And you don't want that, right? Do you see that? So you can get a needle under the weave, and a lot of the times you'll get a slip stitch and then it doesn't go in the right place. So that's why for beginners, I would recommend an Aida. Aida can be difficult to get. It's a lot more commonly sold as a pre-cut size, but if you find some good suppliers, and you will have to search for them. I think there's many lists out there of, I'm in Canada, so of course I always like to support Canadian, but there's many Canadian stores out there that do cut to whatever size you need. And there's also some European retailers. I have used a few out there. So it just takes a little bit of research. And of course, cost is going to be a factor. So whenever possible, I like to go actually into the store. I do not have a local needlework shop close enough to me. I usually generally rely on Michaels. Michaels, again, will only carry your generic type of fabric, so Aida. So you're good to get Aida at Michaels. But again, if you need a large piece, then you might be out of luck. But that is my advice on what fabric to choose. So for a beginner, I would definitely go with Aida. It's a little bit of a stiffer fabric, but still flexible. And you're able to work with it much easier, I feel, than an Evenweave. Evenweave, I think you can save for when you have a little bit more experience and you are comfortable with what you're stitching and you don't mind fixing the slip stitches by figuring out which way to come up. The next question that is common is, how do you calculate the size of your fabric? All right, so let's take a basic project size, and it's going to be full coverage. So let's say you're looking at 200 by 300, okay? Just as an example. Now what I do, instead of doing the math in my head, I have an app on my phone that calculates it for me. As well, there's an app online called Yarntree, or actually it's not an app, it's just a website called Yarntree. Let's see if I can pull it up there. And that will calculate it for you. Okay, so you just Google Yarntree cross-stitch calculator, and away we go. All right, so this is what it looks like. Okay, I'm gonna see, glare, no glare, good. All right, so here you can see, we're gonna say graft size, we're gonna say it is 200 stitches wide by 300 stitches high. Now, the fabric count, threads per inch, that's what fabric count you're choosing, either the 18 count or the 22 count. So I'm going to use 18 count. We're going to go 18. And number of threads that each X covers. This is not really necessary for when calculating the size of fabric that you need, but we'll leave it as B. Now, this part is important. The extra fabric on each side for a border. This is generally for non-full coverage because you need an extra bit on the edges of your stitched piece. So I usually just leave that at 0, and I like a healthy 3 inches on each side. 3 inches will give you enough room after the finished piece. So your finished piece is here, 3 inches to the edge. That gives the framer enough space to do matting as well as finish the piece on the back. Then when you press calculate size, it gives you all the details that you need. So it gives you the stitched area. Finished stitch area is going to be 11 1/8 by 16 5/8. I usually round it up, so we're looking at 11 inches by 16 1/2 inches. But the fabric, it calculates it for you. It does the math. You need 17 inches by 22 1/2. And they suggest a 26 size needle. And now here we can see the app that I use. It's just a straightforward cross-stitch calculator. We're gonna go 200 by 300, and it asks you what count fabric you wanna start your calculations on. I'm gonna go 18, and I want 3 extra on the sides. And again, you get the same answer, 11 inches by 16 1/2. And your full cut fabric size should be 17 by 22 1/2. So that is how you calculate your fabric size. Okay, all right. So now we have the fabric cut to the size that we need it. And now we have to decide where do we start. I would suggest, you've already calculated it and you've done it to 3 inches. Now, you've got a handy dandy ruler that you can use, and it will tell you, obviously you count from the edge 3 inches, that's our marking there. And then you go 3 inches from this edge, and that's our marking there. And you bring the 2 points, and that is going to be your starting point to start stitching your project. Now, I have a neat pro tip. Everybody has Post-its in their house. Did you know that a Post-it is exactly 3 inches by 3 inches? So if you didn't have a ruler handy, all you gotta do is put the Post-it at the corner of your fabric, and it will calculate exactly your starting point, which is going to be right there. Now, my other pro tip is get yourself a water-soluble pen. This is probably one of my favorite things in my tools of cross-stitch items. So we're going to see now here. I'm going to zoom in slightly so you can see what we're working on. Good. All right. So this is where the Post-it marked our starting point. Okay. Now you're going to count. I like to grid my fabric. I find it very important to grid because that will help you if you're working on a full coverage to keep you guided properly. So I'm going to start with my first point there that I got from my Post-it and my ruler right there. You can see the blue mark. Then I'm going to start counting 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Sometimes I have to count over and over again because my eyes will cross. But we'll keep going. I'm going to see if I can zoom in just a touch more. All right. Then we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We'll do one more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And now you're going to go down. So that was the first one. You're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, if you're like me and you've been doing this for years and years, your eyes are kind of trained to it. All you got to do is go down and look across, and there's your other one. Can you still see where I am? Oh, there we are. All right. You can still see where I'm at. Perfect. So then you find the other mark and you mark it off. And then go down to the other row. Okay, so there you have your first set of grid marks. Okay, so that's where you're going to start stitching. So, if you're a beginner to full coverage cross stitch, I would suggest you pick Ada. I would suggest you calculate the finished piece size by using one of the cross stitch calculators. Then the next thing I would definitely suggest is some form of gridding that will help you along the way. Now, let's move on to the next question. So the next question that comes up often is the best type of stitch to use. Now, I will tell you right now, my preference, this is not everybody's preference. The only stitch that I do is a full cross stitch. The only thing that varies with my stitch is if I do it 1/1 or 2/1. So what does that mean? 1/1 and 2/1. Let's see if I can explain myself. So this is 18 count. I'm going to use this because it's the biggest count I have here and it's easier to show. So you've got one square. See, this hole right here is going to be one corner of the X. This is the top right corner of the X. This is the bottom right, and this is the bottom left. So this is 1 X in your cross stitch. So when referring to 1/1 or 2/1, the question is referencing whether you are going to stitch this 1X with one thread over one hole or one area, or you're going to stitch with 2 threads over 1X. That's what it means. If you're going to use 2 threads of floss over 1X, or if you're going to use 1 thread of floss over 1X. So I'll show you. I'm going to start with the largest. So this is 18 count. This is a confetti heavy chart. And this is Little Dreamer's Tree, Mini Little Dreamer's Tree by Heaven and Earth Designs for anyone who's interested. And I'm stitching this on 2/1 full cross. With 18 count, I always recommend 2/1. You will still see little white gaps in the dark colors, for blacks and the navies, but I guarantee that will come out in the wash. It'll fluff up and you won't see those gaps anymore. So 18 count is 2/1. Then we move on to the next count that I work on, 22 count. Less gaps. This is still 2/1. Less gaps in the dark. Still there if you look really, really close, you know, but less. I have tried doing 1/1 on 22 count and I found I didn't like the coverage. There wasn't enough coverage for me. So I stuck to the 22 count 2/1. You may run into a little bit of it getting bulky, but if you stitch it right and you have a method to your madness, it can work out. And what I mean is, if you're going to stitch cross country on 22 count in an area that has a lot of color changes, a lot of threads going in the back of the stitching, it's going to get bulky, and then 22 count 2/1 is going to get difficult. But if you have a piece like this that has a few areas of block colors, but then there's confetti area here for her face, then stitching in small areas like in a cross-country diagonal method or parking, it helps control the bulkiness. And I prefer 2 threads over 1 on 22 count. Then we move on to 25 count. 25 count, this is where I convert into doing 1/1 full cross. Now again, yes, you will see some of the white like we did on the 18 count, but again, when you wash it and the threads fluff up and they kind of come back together, it's all good. And really from a distance, I don't know, the camera's too close, but I can't show you, but from a distance, you can't really tell. And so close up, I'll show you. This is 1/1 on 25 count. And I believe the coverage is fantastic. Like, it's perfect, right? So I would stick to 1/1 on 25 count. Then, the same way that we had a little bit better coverage on the 22 from the 18, I'm going to show you another count higher, which is 28 count. And this is also 1/1. And again, you will see the darker threads because DMC's darker threads, the blacks and the navies, is a little bit thinner thread, and so the coverage is not the best. Some people say, oh, use a anchor black, and I have used that for another project. It is a little thicker, but I've got a lot of DMC, got to use it for something, don't I? So I don't mind this because at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, it's going to look beautiful. All this is going to fill up, and you won't notice all the little black areas that have a little spots in it. It'll come out in the wash. It'll fluff up and it'll all come together and it'll look more like this area, which is nicely covered. So this is 1/1 on 28 count. So yes, I have never done what they call tent stitch or half stitches. Why do you ask? Because it's a personal preference. It's definitely a personal preference. I don't like the way that it looks. I much prefer the full coverage and the way full coverage looks. I don't like the half stitches or the continental stitches or the tent stitches, whatever you may call it. I feel that it distorts the image slightly. Obviously, some people don't mind it because there's many people out there who do stitch in that method. I stick with the full cross. I really like that, and it gives me the look and the feel that I am looking for my project. So again, it's a personal preference. I would say try it out. Try it out and see which one you like. Do like practice sessions. Do a full block of a 10 by 10 square block in each method and put it away. Sit on it for a couple of days. Come back and look at it and see what you think. You know, but don't do it with just one color. Do it with a couple of different colors so you can actually see if there's any distortion and a slanted view to the image, because that's my view on it. So just to give you an idea of how you feel, make sure you do a test area. you don't want to take someone's opinion at face value. You should get your own view on it. And let me know how it goes. But for me, full cross is the only way that I like to stitch. And moving on to the next question, I think I already answered it. It was how many number of threads or floss to use. So again, on 18, I would recommend 2/1, 22 count, as long as you're okay with controlling the confetti heavy areas. I would recommend 2/1. If you're doing 25 count, I would suggest 1/1 full cross. And if you're doing 28 count, I would suggest 1/1 full cross. Now, in between these two, the higher counts and the lower counts, there's another count that's common, which is 20 count. I actually don't have any 20 count, and a friend of mine, Leanne, Small Town Stitches on FlossTube and Instagram, she stitches on a lot of 20 count fabric for her full crosses and some of her other pieces. She recommends that highly. She thinks I should get some, but I need to get rid of all my other fabric first before I start buying some more. So maybe I will give 20 count a go at it. I believe with 20 count, you're still looking at, because it'll be between these two. She's still recommending 2/1 full cross. So research and don't, listen to just one person. So don't just listen to me and go by what I say. This is just my recommendations. There are other videos out there with other recommendations, but my best advice would be do a test stitch. And I know that takes time and you really want to get started on your project, but a test stitch will save you a lot of heartache in the future if you end up doing a half a page, a full page, and then you decide, oh my God, I don't like this at all. And then you have to start the project all over again, or you get frustrated and throw it away. Listen to me, do a test stitch. It'll save you a lot of time and headache down the road. And then you'll know what you like. All right, moving on. Okay, so the next question that has come up often is, how do you start and stop when it's just one strand of floss that you're stitching with? So how to start and stop a thread with one, when you're dealing with only one thread and you can't use your loop method, okay? So first off, you thread your needle and you make a knot at the end of the thread so it doesn't slip through. And then you're gonna start your stitch. So there we go, you can see that? Good. So I'm gonna do the stitch right here. Okay, you do your first leg as normal. When you're starting your second leg, you come up and then you pull your thread until you see the end of the loose thread. There it is. Okay, once that happens, you should still have some left. There's still a loop of thread left here. So keep that the way it is. So don't pull this all the way through, just until you see this loose end, okay? Then you're going to start finishing your leg and you're finishing your X. You're going to pull it until you finish it on top. You're going to pull it until that is finished, but you still have your loose loop at the back. And here's what you're going to do. So now you have to finish this. So the X on the other side is done. Okay, you're going to hang on to this loop right here. So this is your thread that you just pulled through from finishing the X, but you didn't pull it all the way through. You kept this loop loose. Now you're going to finish your thread. How? You're going to do it like this. I'm going to show you now. Okay. You're going to take your needle. You're going to loop it through 3 times from the same direction. Okay, so that it's wrapped around. You can see it's wrapped around one side of the loop. So when you pull it tight, it creates a knot. And that secures your thread. And then you're ready to move on. So that is how I do a start and stop on a one strand of floss when I'm stitching. So the next question is, how do you do a chart, or, mark your chart if you're using a paper chart? Now, for those of you who use Pattern Keeper, I use Pattern Keeper. I love Pattern Keeper. And it works really well because I have an Android tablet. I am an Android girl. I don't have Apple phone. I have an Android phone. So it works great for me. Now, but I digress. Before Pattern Keeper came out, I used paper charts. And I'm going to tell you my method that makes it much, much easier. Okay, so let's say that this is the beginning corner of your project, and then you're going to go across 10, just like we did previously when we were counting the fabric. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then we're going to go down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Come down. And voila. So now this grid looks the same as your fabric. This is all your fabric. Each corner is going to be a corner of an X. Let's do a pretend pattern here. Let's say we have a heart here, a heart here, and a heart here. We're going to use a heart symbol. Okay. Making it up as I go along. I like to keep things symmetrical. Now the next symbol I'm going to use a little X. Sure. We're going to do that. We're going to put one there. Let's put one right here. Then the next symbol I'm going to use is a check mark. So let's do like this, like this, like this, like this, and like this. Okay? All right. So here is your pattern. Let's pretend I did this all across our 4 squares, our 4 10 by 10 squares. So here is the pattern. So your heart is going to be one color, your X's are going to be another color, and your check marks are going to be another color. We're going to start stitching the heart symbol. Here are the tools that we are going to use. Highlighters. You're going to start with your yellow highlighter, and you're going to find on your paper chart all of your heart symbols, and you're going to highlight them in yellow. Now this is bleeding through obviously because it's paper and pencil, but when you have a printed chart, it's not going to do that. So, okay, so you're going to highlight all those. You're going to stitch them exactly where they are. And then when you're done stitching them, you've matched what's on the paper onto your fabric. You're then going to take the pink highlighter and you're going to mark off all your stitched symbols. So you're going to go over the hearts again, like this, and like this. This is very relaxing. It's like coloring for adults, hey? Okay, you're gonna go like that. So now you're ready for your next symbol. So what do? You take your yellow highlighter again, and you find the next symbol, which is the X. You're going to find all the X's, and you're going to highlight them so that you know where they are at a glance. You're going to stitch it there, 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 and there. Once you've got all the yellows done, you're going to come back with the pink, and you're going to mark them off as stitched. So they turn kind of orangish because of the combined colors. But at a glance, now you can see that your paper chart with your highlighter markings matches exactly with what you have on your stitched piece. So now you know you're going to go back and you're going to find all the check marks, which is for whatever color it's supposed to be. And you're going to highlight all the check marks. And that's what you're going to go to next. Oh, my highlighter's all dirty now because of the pencil mark. That's all right. So now you know you're going to go all here. to fill in that next to all the already stitched markings. So whatever you have here should match exactly what you have on your fabric piece. So that's my little pro tip for highlighting on a paper chart. Hope it helped. So those were my recommendations and a few questions that I answered. I really hope they help someone out there. And if you have more questions, add them in the comment box below and I'll make another video. But I think I covered most of the basics, so I hope this helps anybody who needs a little bit of a tip or help, or just to know that everyone goes through the same questions and doubts that you have, and it all turns out okay. And you know what? Even if you make some mistakes, who cares? That makes your piece unique. Own it. And it is what it is, and just enjoy the journey. And I think one thing that I wanted to mention that I forgot was when you are selecting a full coverage piece, first of all, pick something that you are drawn to, that it just gives you joy to look at every time you see the picture. Because let it be known, you are going to be stitching on this piece for a very long time. No matter how small it is, no matter how big it is, it's going to be a very long time. That is what full coverage is. It is a full commitment. And you want to enjoy the journey. So don't pick a piece that you're kind of like on the wall about. I mean, you can. I've done it many times. I've started pieces and then I've put them away. And then years later, I pick them back up because I fell in love with them again. So just make sure that you pick something that's going to bring you joy. And that way you will really enjoy the journey no matter how long it takes. You need to feel that love for the piece that you're working on, because full coverage, I'm telling you, it is a lifelong commitment. Because as you're stitching, yeah, it's going to take a long time. It could take weeks, it could take months, depending on the size of the piece, or it could take years. And then when it is finally complete and you have it displayed on your wall forever, you are going to get so much joy when you remember how much work and effort and love and joy that you put into that piece. That is what I see every time I walk past a framed piece on my wall. I remember working on it. I remember the time of the year. I remember what was going on in my life when I was working on that piece. And the memories that will be involved in working on a full coverage piece, it's immense. So enjoy the journey. I hope this how-to video has helped you a little bit, and I look forward to if anybody has any questions that they'd like me to answer. So thanks so much, everybody. Have a fantastic day. Until next time.